There's no reason to have to prepare 3 meals a day while on passage, especially if you have some delicious and nutritious options available for whoever is at the helm. I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I share our favorite grab-and-go snacks for when we're underway. This episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Yugo. Yugo is the only waterproof floating phone case using dry suit zipper technology. Invest in your safety, because if you don't protect, you can't connect. Your phone is fully functional, and there's plenty of room for your keys, cash, and cards. To get the only dry bag on the market with 0 phone fails, visit yugowear.com. That's UGOWEAR.com. Yugo. Prepare for adventure. So let's talk about snacks on passage. Even if you're just coastal cruising and not planning any major offshore passages, it's likely that you'll do at least a few overnights. Now, while our longest passages were all 4 days apiece, each year we do several other shorter ones as well. And while we tried to have at least one real meal together each day around sunset, we found that we actually preferred to snack during our watches instead of making sandwiches or other meals. Now, Dave and I generally operate on a 6-on, 6-off schedule, as we have found we both do better with longer sleep periods. And it was our rule that the on-watch persons spend their time in the cockpit, watching, not down below, and not reading. Now, while we might have modified our systems had we been doing really extended passages, this worked well for coastal hops where we always had a reasonable amount of traffic around. So having food that we could quickly grab worked well. And there wasn't really an obvious breakfast, lunch, and dinner time anyways. So that Dave would know what was available to eat, and so that I wouldn't be surprised that something had been eaten that I was counting on for another meal, we found it handy to keep a bin in the galley with grab-and-go snacks and a list of other foods that were in the refrigerator. So, with no further ado, here is our top 11 snacks on passage. And they're good on a day sail, too. The first is a rice or pasta salad. Maybe that's not really a snack, but this was one of our core foods on passage, as either of us could grab a bowl whenever we felt like it. I'd make up a big bowl ahead of time and keep it in the refrigerator. Now, there's a link in the show notes to a very easy rice or pasta salad recipe and tons of variations depending on what you have. And you can also make it with couscous, which cooks really quickly and is good if it's really hot so you don't heat up the kitchen. Okay, the next one is GORP. That stands for Good Old Raisins and Peanuts. This is particularly good in rough weather, such as our rather rambunctious sail from the Bahamas to Florida on our very first offshore passage. Okay, I just put the GORP into plastic bottles that fit into the drink holder on the steering pedestal, and we just grab a handful at a time. A good mix is roughly equal parts peanuts, raisins, and M&Ms, but you can use other dried fruit bits and other small candies as well. Things that won't melt in your hand are by far the best. Okay, there's hard-boiled eggs. That's the next one. These are another snack that are good anytime, but they're particularly good if you get into rough weather, as they're easy to eat. I'd boil a bunch of eggs and shell them before a trip, and then I'd put them in a covered container in the refrigerator. Now, the generally accepted wisdom seems to be that even in their shell, hard-boiled eggs shouldn't be kept more than a day without refrigeration, as cooking does something to the protein, and they don't last as long as when they're raw. Okay, raw vegetables. Before leaving, I'd always cut up a bunch of snacking veggies, such as carrot and celery sticks, broccoli bits, jicama, and whatever else was locally available, and I'd put them in plastic bags in the refrigerator. Now, add some water to the carrots, the celery, and jicama to keep them crisp, but they'll stay good for quite a while. Fruit's another good one. Dave particularly liked having oranges that he could just peel while sitting in the cockpit. Apples usually bruise too easily, But I'd get things like mangoes and papaya and cut them up and put them in the refrigerator for the first couple of days. And olives. Oh, yeah. We can get in a lot of grocery stores, you can get single-serve pouches or cups of green and black olives. These are absolutely wonderful for snacking. I liked them particularly in the middle of the night. Crackers and cheese are another big one. Crackers go stale quickly in humidity. So I tried to buy brands that came in sleeves, and we would just get out one sleeve at a time and keep the others, even unopened, in Ziploc bags or lock-and-lock containers that would keep them dry. Peanut butter and crackers or some veggies with the peanut butter, those are really good. When it gets bouncy and it's hard to hold on to a lot of things, I just grab the jar of peanut butter and either some crackers or more often some of the veggies. And in the cockpit, I tuck the jar of peanut butter between my knees and find a place to wedge the bag of carrots and then just dunk the carrots right in the jar of peanut butter. That left one hand free for me to hold on to the boat. Oh, here's Dave's favorite, popcorn. In the Sea of Cortez, we were much more likely to have too little wind than too much, and so we would motor. And that meant that our batteries would be fully charged, even while we were running the radar and the autopilot full time. And so Dave would fire up the microwave for his specialty, popcorn. Now, if you do decide to indulge, be sure to do so at watch changes, as it can really annoy someone who's trying to sleep to suddenly hear the microwave or pop, 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 pop. Nuts were another one of our favorites. I could frequently get almonds or pistachios at a reasonable price when we were in Mexico, and boy, they were wonderful. Here in the U.S., you can get them in single-serving packets, and those are great too because they kind of limit the size and you know how many you're buying. Chex Mix is another one of our favorites. Now, it's hard to get pre-made Chex Mix outside the U.S., but it's easy to make up. You can do it for yourself quite easily. And sometimes you won't actually even find Chex, but you can find similar types of things. I'd make up a big pan of it, and then I put it into single-serving size Ziplocs. You have to keep it in airtight containers, as it'll get stale very quickly in humid air. If it does get stale, you can refresh it by baking it for about 15 minutes at 250. But that's kind of hard to do mid-passage. The first longer trip we made, 14 days of helping a friend relocate his boat from the Bahamas to the Rhode Island. We did a combination of sunrise to sunset motoring in the ICW, with a couple of offshore hops when the weather allowed it. And while I had planned for a few snacks, I primarily planned for normal meals. I quickly found that keeping the boat constantly moving is tiring, and trying to prepare more than one meal a day was hard. By the end of the trip, I was exhausted, as I was pulling full watches as well as galley duty. Our next trip, we switched to mostly snacking with things prepared ahead of time. Not only did I have a much better time, we were also happier with our food, as we could get what we wanted, whenever we wanted it. But we still had that one real meal together each day. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast. Please tell your friends about it. And if you feel like it, leave us a review. Those 5 stars are always making us do a little happy dance.